My name is Sara Smith. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a professor of history at American River College, and today's date is June 6, 2023. So let's start off by establishing the basics. What's your full name? What are your pronouns? And what's your date of birth?
My name is Izzy Sanilescu, or my chosen name is Isabel Snow. My pronouns are she, her, and what was the other one?
Date of birth.
Date of birth, February 19th, 2003.
So that makes you 20 years old, right?
Born on February 19th, 2003. I'm 20 years old. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me a little about yourself. What are your interests and hobbies? What do you like to do?
I like music. The major question is later, right?
Not yet. This is just what are your interests and hobbies?
Interests and hobbies. I mean, I like reading. I enjoy watching shows, movies. Like spend most of my time on the internet. I like 3D printing. Play some games occasionally. Love to just like spend time with friends, my partners. Quality time is pretty good. Let's see, what else? I love music. Ton of different genres I enjoy. I also play the violin. Have been playing for 15 years at this point, ish. Also been playing the guitar for 3 or 4 years now.
So you played the violin for 15 years and you're 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
That means you started around the age of 5.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Do you play publicly at all?
Used to. Nowadays I've kind of developed stage fright. Like, I can't go out on stage and like do stuff in public. I will like shake, like just stumble over everything. Notes, words. But I have been working on that a little, trying to get over it.
What do you think? Why do you think you're suffering from stage fright these days?
I'm not sure, really. Just kind of a reaction, I guess. Maybe anxiety. I mean, even now I'm kind of shaking a little.
So where did you grow up and where do you live now?
I grew up here in Sac Cal, born and raised, grass-fed, free range. Yeah, spent really most, if not all of my life here, in the same house too. It's nice staying in the same place, but it's also nice to feel like I'm definitely ready to like go out and explore, be my own person. What was the other?
I think you got it. I said, where did you grow up and where do you live now? Are you thinking about moving out of Sacramento at some point?
Definitely moving out of my parents' house as soon as possible. Not like fully out of Sacramento, or at least not California. Probably gonna stay here. Of course, provided that legislation doesn't force me out of here sooner than that.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So all the anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ bills that have been getting passed, it's even here in California, it's a little makes me a little nervous.
It's understandable.
Like, if it gets beyond the federal level, then who knows what may happen.
So where do you currently attend college and what do you study?
I currently go to ARC, American River College, and I study commercial music recording.
And you're a full-time student?
Currently, yes.
When did you start at ARC?
I started at ARC this spring. Before that, I attended SEC, actually. For my first semester was here in fall.
So what drew you to, you said commercial music?
Recording, audio recording, music production. In the high school I went to, there were CT classes, what are they called? Career courses. And I took the recording class, and it just sort of clicked for me. It was something I found I was good at. It was enjoyable for me. I found it really interesting. And it just sort of became my desired career.
That's great that you found your passion. So can you tell me about how you identify with regard to your social identities, broadly speaking? So race, sexuality, gender, ability, religion, and so on.
I mean, I'm white, I guess, obviously. Let's see. I grew up here. My parents grew up in Moldova, and I immigrated here, I think 25 years ago, maybe at this point. They were here a few years before I was born. They grew up in the Soviet Union. So yeah, my parents grew up in Moldova, immigrated here when they were, they immigrated here when they won the green card lottery, around 25 years ago or so. They grew up in the former Soviet Union, in what is now Moldova, a relatively small country, kind of sandwiched between Ukraine and Romania. I'd been there only once when I was pretty young, but I did have some pretty good memories associated with it. My mom is ethnically Jewish, so I guess that technically makes me ethnically Jewish. We are non-practicing though. My grandma does practice, but we only really to holidays and celebrations and stuff. Let's see.
Is your mom religious?
My mom is religious. She is Adventist and raised me as such. She discovered Adventism when she immigrated here. It definitely affected my past and current relationship with her, and my life, of course. Definitely didn't make it any easier to be accepted by my parents.
And your dad is religious?
My dad, I guess he believes in a God, but he doesn't really practice any religion. He supports my mom, but he doesn't really go to church.
What do you mean when you say he supports your mom?
He supports my mom in her religion.
Oh, in her religious practices.
Yeah.
and her beliefs.
Mhm.
Does that influence their relationship with you?
Yeah.
Yeah. How so?
Well, for one, it's one of the reasons they don't accept me as queer. Uh, Also serves for some interesting conversations we have that sometimes turn into arguments, but most of the time it can remain relatively civil.
So, would you mind just talking a little bit about what your identities are? In addition to, as you said, you're white and your parents are from Moldova.
Mhm.
What about your sexual orientation, gender identity?
I identify as bisexual, and I also identify as trans feminine or a trans woman. Um, Although I guess my identity is a tiny bit more complicated than that, but I choose to use those labels to make things a little easier.
Um, if you feel comfortable, would you mind elaborating a little bit on what you mean when you say my identity is a little bit more complicated than that?
I mean, like, gender and sexuality is a spectrum, or rather a bimodal distribution, but still a spectrum. And of course, I might fall a little outside of the usual uh, range, I guess. Like, I'm most likely some flavor of non-binary, but I mostly identify with women and femininity. I guess I just really haven't had a good chance to fully explore my identity, um, especially with my parents, but that is changing.
Well, you're young yet. You're 20 years old.
Mhm.
So, did you say what your sexual orientation is?
Yeah, I'm bisexual. Of course, that it's also a little more complicated. And when I say I'm bisexual, I mean I'm attracted to most, if not all, genders, but my attraction varies in how it feels to be attracted to one gender versus another. I'm attracted to different genders differently.
And so you said you may identify as non-binary, but also trans femme. Can you elaborate a little bit on what being trans feminine means to you?
It means well, as I said, I identify with femininity um, a lot more than I identify with anything masculine, uh, with masculinity and men in general. I'm definitely not one of the boys, but don't really feel entirely like one of the girls either. Although I would like that to change a little. I guess I guess I just don't really feel accepted as a woman yet, so that might affect things a bit.
So when did you realize your gender identity and your sexual orientation?
Sexual orientation, I realized first. I realized I was bisexual in middle school, sometime around middle school, I think. Um, I just realized I found guys attractive as I found guys attractive too. And then I found out I was attracted to pretty much all genders. So that made me think about it a lot and eventually settle on the bisexual label. And then I figured out my gender identity in high school. A few years after that, I was kind of browsing. I was kind of figuring out my identity as a LGBTQ person, kind of exploring the online spaces that I found, and I kind of started relating a little too hard to other trans people, and well, that's how I found I was trans. Yeah, I just never really felt like a guy.
How did your family respond? Or when did you come out to them, and how did they respond? Did it take you a while to come out to them?
So I found I was trans, I think, August 30th or 31st. I came out to my parents October 30th, or was it November 1st? I don't remember exactly. Somewhere in that time frame. So almost exactly a month after realizing I was trans. I came out to my friends first. They responded pretty well, accepted me pretty much almost immediately. My parents, on the other hand, they had a tougher time accepting it. I was, I think, doing some stereotypically unmasculine thing. Mom asked her usual joking question of, "Well, you're not a girl, are you?" And I just sat there staring at her, kind of with a half smile. Then it just all came out. It all came out, and I came out. She didn't take it very well, but I think my dad took it even worse. He followed me around the house with a Bible, quoting verses at me from it. It was a difficult time after that. I had taken my phone before that for some stupid reason, but they decided to keep it after I came out, and essentially just kind of isolated me from most of my support group, from spaces I could have gone to. But things have gotten better. They have gotten a bit more tolerant of it. They still aren't really accepting of it, but at least we don't argue about it constantly. Mostly because I kind of stopped mentioning it.
So you said they don't really accept your gender identity?
Gender nor sexuality.
Your gender identity or your sexual orientation. How did your mom respond? You said what your dad did, which sounds incredibly hard, but how did your mom respond?
Um, I don't really remember. I do know it wasn't really a good response, but it was just kind of a quiet disappointment, I guess.
Did it create some very palpable distance between you in your relationship?
Um, I guess, yeah.
So you said that you argued a lot. Can you elaborate a little bit? What do you mean when you say that you argued a lot? How long did that go on for, and what did your arguments consist of?
Well, after I came out, we just got into fights a lot. Um, about about my gender, about my sexuality, about um, I was trying to defend myself and my stance, and they just kept attacking it. They would not accept me. So eventually I just learned to stop eating and bringing it up, and that fixed things.
Did that have an impact on your mental health? You said you were a teenager at the time when you had this conversation, the initial conversation with them, right?
It did. It wasn't necessarily because of it, but it definitely did contribute. I got diagnosed with depression not soon after. So not being accepted definitely didn't help. Again, not necessarily because of it, but I did also have suicidal feelings for a while. But thankfully got Medicaid for it, so mostly through it.
Do you see a therapist?
I used to. I currently have a psychiatrist. I did have a psychologist, but I stopped seeing her after COVID forced us to switch to telehealth, which didn't help nearly as much. And also, she was a Christian therapist picked by my parents, so that also didn't really help much in that regard.
So you said you're thinking about you want to move out. Do you think is that connected to sort of how your parents responded to your sexual orientation and your gender identity?
I definitely don't feel like I can fully be myself in that house. Definitely crave independence, which is the main reason I want to move out. And just be myself. Love who I love, do what I do without anyone there to judge or, I guess, harass me about it.
So where did you find support and affirmation as you came out as bisexual and as trans?
Also in my friend group. They are a wonderful bunch of people, but I unfortunately don't really talk to them much anymore. Kind of mostly dropped contact after I switched high schools. But while I did have them as a friend group, they were amazing. Um, there were a few other fellow queer kids in that friend group. Actually, a long time childhood, well, an old childhood friend helped me kind of explore my trans identity as I was coming out, at least a little. And some of my other friends did stuff for me, like paint my nails um, and teach me a little bit about makeup and stuff like that.
Did you find support among other family members aside from your parents?
Later on, I did come out to my cousins. And at first, they were a little apprehensive about it, but eventually, two older cousins were relatively accepting, and the others are just a little too young to really understand what it's about. But I guess they're okay with it. But my adult relatives aren't really accepting of it at all.
And do you think that's because they're religious? Or why do you think that is?
Not necessarily because they're religious. I think mostly because their political views. Just kind of my queer identity is kind of the secret thing to keep quiet about in the family.
Do you think your family, your parents responded the way they did in part because of your identity as trans femme in particular?
Probably, yeah.
Just thinking about the ways that society derides femininity in particular, right? And sometimes, not always, fathers have a particularly hard time with their trans femme kids because of that.
I was always more close with my mom than my dad. Mostly because he has anger issues and just a lot of issues in general that make it kind of a little difficult to have a relationship with him.
Is there anything else you want to say about how your family reacted before we move on?
They have gotten better about it. Like, they no longer really care that I shave or that I'm growing my hair out, or that I shave or I'm growing my hair out, or that I'm trying my best to dress more femininely with the options I have available. Or that or that I train my voice and to be more feminine. They used to just bother me about stuff like that constantly. After I came out, they forced me to cut my hair and It was pretty hard for me. I didn't go to a stylist again after that for maybe 2 or 3 years.
You didn't go where? I'm sorry.
To a barber or stylist again for 2 or 3 years. A little bit of a traumatic experience, I guess. It was definitely hard, but it thankfully has gotten easier. It gets better.
And when you say your the options that you have available, what do you mean by that? Like, do you feel like your gender expression is limited on what you can do given your circumstances?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mostly have to shop in the men's section. There aren't really a lot of good cardigans in the men's section, which is what I prefer. Everything I'm wearing right now is from the men's section, so.
Is that because your parents buy your clothes still?
They pay for them, so.
You pay for them.
Yeah.
I think there's there's a clothing swap. I think it's sponsored by the Lavender Library, or I don't know if it's a gender health center as well. Have you heard of that?
Mm-hmm. I did like browse around last fall semester. I was still here at SCC, but I didn't really want to take anything because I was afraid my parents might find it. I actually went thrifting for the first time like on Saturday. And I shopped in the women's section with a friend for the first time ever. So that was pretty fun and really validating.
Oh yeah. How did that make you feel? Anything else you want to say? That's amazing.
It was great. I got some cardigans, some skirts, a few hoodies. And I'm gonna try to wear some of it if the opportunity presents itself. First, I gotta find a place where to hide it. So,
Do you think sorry, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but do you think if ARC or SEC provided some clothing, like if that was one of the services that was provided, do you think that would be helpful to you?
maybe. I'm not really sure, but it would definitely be something to look at.
Or, I mean, I guess something like the Pride Center could sponsor a clothing swap on campus.
Could be fun.
Yeah. Okay, so we didn't talk about disability. Are you disabled?
I guess.
Or how would you talk about it?
I mean, I guess I do have ADHD. I have ASD, autism spectrum disorder, and I do have depression. But I am treated for all three. This disability is one word for it. Conditions are not is another. I don't know. I just think of it now as part of my daily life.
And religion? Are you religious?
Kind of used to be. growing up, of course, I was raised Adventist. I did believe in God. Kind of stopped believing in anything as I grew older and thought about more. Now I'm agnostic, which means I believe that we can't really confirm or deny any one. We can't truly know what is out there. If there is a God, if there isn't, if there is, which God is the right God of the countless throughout human civilization.
Do you think your experiences coming out as trans and as bisexual, did that shape your relationship with religion at all?
I definitely, not sure which way around it was, whether I stopped being religious because I was bi, or because I was queer, or I could accept myself as queer because I stopped being religious. Kind of happened at the same time, so. But the fact is, at a point, I stopped going to church and stopped really believing in Christianity. At a point, I stopped believing in God and Christianity in general. Around the same time, I started exploring my queer identity.
Why do you think that is?
Just part of it was I knew I wouldn't really find much of a very accepting community in the church if I came out. I just knew Adventism was no longer for me.
Okay, so how do your disabilities or your condition, you said ADHD, autism, depression, do you think they impact you on a daily basis?
They do. Even though I am treated for them, can still be tough. ADHD, I have executive dysfunction, which makes it really hard to start new things, to not procrastinate, to with ADHD, it's even sometimes difficult to remember to do things, or I might forget what I wanted to do like seconds after, think about it, and then getting distracted by something else. I get distracted a lot. I get distracted a lot. Guess I also fidget a lot, but that doesn't really affect me as much. With ASD, it affects my social skills a lot, how I interact with people, how I present myself. How I present myself socially and in general. Most of my social skills are learned from ABA. I forget the acronym, but basically it's just like teaching those who need some help with figuring out social interactions, how to better socially interact.
Do you think your autism in particular shapes your or relates to in some way your sexual orientation and your gender identity?
Only insofar as much as it kind of prevents the inhibitions that would otherwise likely prevent me from exploring and accepting that part of myself. I don't really say it affects my gender or sexuality that much.
Do you think, is there any other ways you can think of that, like being autistic and being trans and bisexual, how they relate to each other at all? Shape each other?
I mean, there are studies that found that there is a correlation between being autistic and being trans, but like I said, it's theorized that it's most likely because of the reduced need to fit in. The reduced, I guess. Not really. Is basically my answer.
Okay. So how have you been? Oh wait, when did you realize that you were autistic? I'm asking a bunch of questions about autism because I've actually interviewed many people who are autistic, and so I think that's a theme that's coming out of the interviews. So I'm looking at the intersection of transness, queerness, and autism in particular. So that's why I'm asking so many questions. But yeah, when did you realize that you were autistic?
Didn't really realize I was autistic. I was first diagnosed with ADHD in 3rd or 4th grade, I think. And then my social counselor in middle school told my parents that I should also probably get tested for autism. And we did, and it turns out I am autistic as well. So that was also fun to deal with. What you said about there being a high correlation of autistic individuals that you've interviewed, there is, of course, some correlation at least between neurodivergency and being queer. I guess because it can make you, autism, for example, can make you more likely to stray and be willing to stray from the norm.
Yeah, I mean, if you're questioning social norms, then you can more easily question norms around gender and question your own gender identity and your own gender expression, right? Yeah. As well as your sexual orientation.
Yeah. Like I said, can kind of inhibit the inhibitions that prevent you from exploring that area of yourself.
So how, if you feel comfortable talking about this a little bit more, but how have you been treated because you're autistic growing up?
And of course, growing up, I didn't know I was autistic, well, at least until middle school. I was always kind of the black sheep. I never really had a place among most of the other kids. I did have a few friends, but there were few and far between, mostly. Most of the other people in my grade just kind of rejected me socially. Spent a lot of time in the library, reading books, just spending time by myself. Also mostly because I got into trouble on the playground a lot. Also because I didn't know how to interact socially. Just constantly got in trouble.
Do you think your teachers knew how to support you as somebody who was autistic?
I mean, like I said, not knowing that I was autistic in elementary school, they couldn't have been able to support me. Some did, some didn't support me in general. Help with actually getting stuff done and help with, I mean, just like personally help me in general. Some did, some didn't. My sixth grade teacher was absolutely horrible. I think he hated me for some reason.
It's awful to think back, think that your teacher hated you. I mean, you were 12 years old.
Like he almost constantly singled me out because I would do weird things, I guess.
Well, anybody who's teaching sixth graders and shows that kind of animosity to any individual kid should not be a teacher of sixth graders.
He was not a great teacher. I don't think he liked kids that much.
So anything else you want to say about that? Or how you've been treated?
After I was diagnosed, however, definitely helped shed some light on things. Helped explain why some things were as they were. It also allowed me to get some accommodations that some of them helped, some of them didn't.
What kind of accommodations?
Like more time to turn in assignments, more time to get assignments done, assignments and the tests done. Ability to work outside of the classroom in a quiet space, stuff like that.
So, what do you think some of your strengths are as somebody who is who has ADHD, who has ASD, and is queer and trans?
It definitely allows me to have a more expansive worldview. It definitely allows me to be more accepting and compassionate than I think I would otherwise be. It's helped me support others who have lived through and experienced the same things, or some of the same things I have. Before I realized I was bi, I was kind of an edgy kid, especially growing up in a relatively conservative household and being surrounded by and exposed to relatively conservative people, and especially on the internet. I definitely wasn't that great to those of my friends that were queer. But realizing I was bi allowed me to reshape my worldview, to better understand and be more compassionate to those of my friends that I was not so kind to before. To better understand them, I guess.
You mentioned that your parents are immigrants from Moldova. Can you talk some about your experience growing up in an immigrant family?
So growing up, Russian was my first language. I didn't really start speaking English until, well, even start learning English until like around 4 or 5, maybe. I remember one time going to a daycare. When I was maybe 5. They were singing what I now remember as "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star," but I could not understand a word. I was so confused why I couldn't understand them and why they couldn't understand me. But thankfully, eventually learned English, obviously. Definitely have it was definitely a bit of a culture shock, going from only knowing my tiny little bubble of my home and my parents to going to daycare and then to preschool, learning English and stuff like that. I guess I adapted pretty quickly. Definitely. There is actually a pretty large community of Russian and Ukrainian speaking individuals here in Sacramento, or California in general, really. I hear like a lot of people. I hear a lot of people like passing by who speak Russian or who speak Ukrainian, stuff like that, in the store, on vacation, at the beach, just in general daily life. So trying to really feel like a complete disconnect from my community, but still, I don't know where I'm going with this.
Would you say that you said just now, did you say you feel connected to the community or do you feel kind of disconnected?
I don't feel entirely disconnected from the community because, well, I know that there are so many other Russian-speaking people around me. But I also feel more connected to the English-speaking community. I feel like at this point, Russian is kind of my second language, rather than my first. Don't entirely identify with kind of the Slavic, former Soviet people who were came here from the former Soviet Union, basically.
Do you feel connected to second generation immigrants? So, people whose parents were from Moldova or somewhere else, and like from Russia or Ukraine?
In part, in the high school I went to first, and in my middle school, I went to COA and then Futures, and most of the people there, like, well over half knew how to speak Russian. What was the question again?
Question was, just can you talk about your experiences, broadly speaking, growing up in an immigrant family? I could ask a follow-up question.
Sure.
Did it impact or shape your, well, you just started to talk about this, but your educational experience?
It did a bit. Of course, I learned Russian before I learned English, so it was a little interesting, only being able to speak Russian in a English-speaking world.
Did that present some challenges in the classroom at all when you were learning English and trying to get your schoolwork done?
A few, but then again, I was at, like, by kindergarten, I knew some English, quite a bit of English actually. And of course, I was on par with the other kids, only just learning the ABCs.
Do you think there's it shaped your how your parents responded to you coming out at all? Do you think there's some lack of understanding there, in part because there's sort of a cultural divide?
I guess it did in part. Yeah, it was definitely mostly religious, but also definitely cultural, and of course political. It's just not something that's really accepted in that culture, I guess.
Is there anything else you feel like you'd want to say on that topic before moving on? I have a couple of questions about class before talking about education.
It is nice being bilingual. It definitely opens up a few more opportunities for me. And being multicultural also kind of opens up a new perspective for me to I guess add into my experience.
So you mentioned that your family is middle class. Can you elaborate some? What does being middle class mean to you? What are your families? What is your do your parents do for a living?
My parents work for the county. I'm not sure of their current positions at this point, but at one point they did work for the DHA, Department of Human Assistance. Now I think they work as translators for mass email. What's it called?
Service or something?
They help with translating pages and services, and they also they help with. I believe they help with helping people get benefits like CalFresh, CalWorks, Medicare. But but they do make pretty good money,
Mhm.
relatively good money. We don't really have to worry about having enough money for our needs and even our wants. I'd say we're pretty well off.
So do you don't currently work for a wage?
No.
Why is that? Are you considering finding a job to give you some financial independence from them?
I would be working, but I don't believe I can manage both and a full-time education and a job at the same time right now.
Oh, I see. So do financial stressors ever make it difficult for you to concentrate on your classes?
No. I'm paying for college through the Promise program, so free for me for 4 semesters, as long as I'm taking 12 units. I am going to look into whether I can have a reduced load and still get the Promise program benefits.
Why do you think having a reduced load would be helpful?
It would make it at least possible to actually complete all my classes without failing them. I think I definitely took too many classes last semester, and I failed most of them.
How many classes did you take?
Let's see. I had history. I had piano. I had the recording class. I had a world music class, and I was supposed to have an English class that I was going to retake from the previous semester, but I had to drop the history class. I dropped the English class. I failed the music history class, and I got pretty bad grades in the other two.
Why do you think you struggled in your classes last semester?
In part because I took too many to concentrate on at once. The workload was too great, so I guess my executive dysfunction just completely I just like couldn't do any of the work because I couldn't do some of the work.
Were you taking classes online or on ground?
I was taking 2 classes on ground and the rest were online. Them being online also made it a little more difficult to prioritize and set aside time to do them. Let's see.
Did you feel like you had some issues with motivation as well?
Probably, yeah. Perhaps.
Did you find that your professors were supportive of you at all? Like, did they provide accommodations or extensions on assignments or help you sort of navigate all of the work that you had to do?
Yeah. The issue was I kind of fell behind at the very beginning of classes of the semester, and I just couldn't really catch up at that point. But it's also partly my fault because I needed to reapply to DSPS and never got around to it. I needed to reapply because I transferred from SEC to ARC and didn't know it was did carry over.
Well, that's interesting that it doesn't carry over. I didn't realize that either.
Yeah, you have to completely reapply.
Doesn't make sense. Well, is there anything that you think your professors could have done to help support your success in the classes that you either dropped or failed? Or just didn't do as well as you wanted to? Yeah.
It wasn't so much up to the professors and more up to me and my embarrassment at not being able to get the things done that I need to get done.
If your professors had reached out to you individually and sort of just had a one-on-one with you, do you think, and then sort of like developed a plan with you about how to do better in the class, do you think that would have helped? Or did that happen?
I guess they kind of tried to reach out. I'm not sure if it would have helped if they did more to try to reach out, but it's also partly on me because I didn't reach out myself.
If you had set up your accommodations with DSPS, how do you think that would have helped you last semester?
Not actually sure. And the accommodations I have here anyway in college, I mean, aren't really as helpful as they were in grade school.
That's something other students have said as well. If you could transplant some of the accommodations you had in grade school to the college level, what would those accommodations be, do you think?
Really more time on assignments and stuff. Because here it can't really be an accommodation because it's mostly completely up to the professor. If you need more time on the assignment, it's like I said, completely up to the professor and the professor-student relationship. And it's up to the student to ask for more time.
What about counseling support? Did you get more counseling support in grade school or in high school?
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you were at SEC and you had your DSPS accommodations, was there a counselor that you were working with a little bit more closely than just any random counselor?
I mean, I did have a couple meetings with DSPS counselor, maybe one or two more than the usual counselor, but the counselors here in college are kind of more distant than in high school or elementary school, in grade school.
What do you mean when you say more distant? Do you mean like you have to reach out to the counselors here and they reach out to you more when you were in grade school and high school?
It's both that you have to take more initiative in reaching out, and in that it's a lot harder to build a relationship with the counselors than in grade school, because there you saw the counselor a lot more. They were kind of around on campus, and you could kind of like almost create a, if not a friendship, then at least a somewhat professional relationship between counselor and student. Here it's just you see a counselor like once or twice a semester, and it's usually not even the same counselor.
Is there anything else you want to add on that topic?
The issues with accessibility are more so with society in general, expectations of, and then just general expectations rather than something specifically an issue with college.
Okay, so I wanted to talk some about a little about your experience in high school, and then move on to talking more about your experience in college so far. So were you, well, I guess my first very broad question is, can you talk some about your educational journey from high school to the present? I know that's very broad, but what occurs to you and how you would respond to that question?
So high school, so my middle school and high school were, at least at first, in the same kind of campus. So it was a pretty smooth transition from middle school to high school. The first high school I went to, Futures High, as I said, had a pretty large Russian-speaking student population. So it was nice being able to relate to peers in another way that I haven't really been able to in other public schools. Let's see. Eventually, Futures moved to a different campus in Rio Linda, so pretty far away from where I lived. When my grades started to drop, mostly because of social issues and depression, and coming out definitely didn't help with that. I transferred to SAVA, Sacramento Academic and Vocational Academy, which was a independent study school. You only had to be on campus 1 day a week for 3 hours at minimum, but usually a bit more. Most of the assignments were online, which I liked at the time, because you could always go back and review everything that you had gone over up to that point. And of course, it had the career classes. So like they had agriculture, they had culinary, they had first aid, like paramedics, they had a firefighter course, they had a civil design course, like architecture. They had and automotive course, photography, and of course, music recording, which I decided to go into. It was definitely a really good high school, solid. All the teachers there were nice, and because everything was online, you only had everything was online except for the career classes. You only had one central teacher you had to like report to, and that you could build a relationship with, which was nice. And also, a bunch of the other staff were amazing as well.
That's nice. So were you out as trans and bi in high school?
I found out and came out as trans to my friend group at Futures first. And when I transferred to Sava,
So can you talk some about your experience being out in high school?
should just like continue for more or less off.
Yeah. Actually, if you don't mind starting over.
Starting over.
Yeah.
So I was out at Futures. Well, I came out at Futures after so I figured it out, and I came out at Futures first to my friend group, and of course, being at Futures, being a mostly Slavic-ish, Russian-ish community. Most other students and teachers there weren't really as accepting. There were, of course, a few good teachers that I had that were just amazing with that. And then when I transferred to Sava, I started going by Izzy. Started growing out my hair. I was just sort of able to explore my gender identity a little more than I had been able to before with my parents. Because transferring to Sava, they kind of stepped back a bit.
What was that experience like? So changing your name to Izzy and being more out. Did you find that you were experiencing any harassment or discrimination? Did you find support from people at that high school?
I mean, most people didn't really like. Most people didn't notice or care. Those that did were pretty supportive, I'd say. My homeroom teacher, Miss Janilo, was pretty supportive, if not a little bit. She was supportive in the typical straight alleyway, in that she was there sympathetically, but not empathetically, basically.
So did any of your high school classes cover queer or trans topics at all?
There might have been like one or two mentions of it, but not much. I don't really remember anything.
What do you think it would have meant to you if you would have been in the classroom and you discovered that the class actually talked about transness and queerness more broadly? Do you think that would have been important to you?
Definitely would have been nice to learn about things actually in class. There were, of course, other. There was, of course, inclusivity in other aspects, like ethnicity, for example. We definitely went over that. I think we would have gone over it if Pride Month wasn't like in summer vacation.
How about in college? Have any of your classes covered queer or trans topics?
Very, very few. Actually, I want to add. I wanted to start a GSA or SAGA, as I would have called it, Salva Saga. Catch your right. I kind of started to get the ball rolling a little, but I didn't really know how to proceed after that. And also, I wasn't really able to run GSA because I was still pretty busy with school stuff.
And why did you want to start a GSA in high school?
To be able to like create and find and to be able to create a community of fellow queer people for myself and for others. That was the main reason I wanted to start a GSA.
So if you don't mind, maybe going back to that question about college classes, you said that a couple of classes maybe covered queer and trans topics.
Not really covered. It was discussed at some points. In this class, I actually did a presentation on the SEC on the SEC LGBTQ Center.
What's IDIS?
IDIS.
IDIS.
Interdisciplinary. It was like an introductory class to college.
And did you choose the topic for the presentation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not like you were given a list of topics. You had some freedom about the topics that you chose.
It was resources available to students at college.
Okay. And what was that experience like, giving that presentation?
It was fun. We got extra credit if we came up dressed in a appropriate outfit. So I dressed up as a giant rainbow flag.
And how did the professor and other students respond to your presentation?
I responded to it pretty well. I guess same as any other presentation. In that class, we also there was some other discussion, first day we went over pronouns and identity and stuff, which we didn't really do in other classes, so that was good.
Why do you think that was important?
It showed, for one, that the teacher actually cared about that, and it showed that it was an inclusive class.
Do you wish your other classes would do the same?
Yeah.
How would that make you feel if that was the norm in every class?
If it was norm and accepted in every class, it would be pretty nice.
Do you think there's something would shift about your sense of belonging in the classroom if that's the way the class started? Comfort.
I feel it would definitely make for a more inclusive and accepting feeling space.
So have other classes talked about queer and trans topics at all?
Other classes, not really, not that I remember.
Oh yeah, if you've had experiences taking classes that talk about queer and trans topics, and I think, what was your answer to that?
If I had classes that talk about queer and trans topics, not really.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Not entirely certain. It's just something that's not really brought up much outside of queer circles. I guess it is changing, but there are people who aren't very happy about it, like my parents. I would like for there to be more talk about queer and trans topics.
So if you could, would you take additional courses or any courses that focus on queer and trans topics, either in part or entirely?
I'm not sure I would go out of my way to specifically take classes about queer and trans topics because I already have a lot to get done with both with my general ed classes and my major classes.
If a course covered the same requirements as another class, say like Intro to LGBTQ Studies covered exactly the same requirements as the history class, right?
Yeah.
Would you take that intro class, the Intro to LGBTQ Studies?
Yeah.
What would you hope to find in a course like that? Or why would you consider taking a class that, like Intro to LGBTQ Studies?
Well, for one, I'd love to learn even more about the community. This will also provide a community of like-minded people to get to know.
Have faculty done anything in their classes? I mean, you already mentioned this one example of talking about pronouns and identity at the beginning of the class, but is there anything else you can think of that faculty have done to make you feel more included in the classroom, even if the curriculum itself didn't focus on queer and trans topics?
mean, outside of being already pretty decent people, not much, I guess.
Is there anything that faculty have done to make you feel like you don't belong or that you feel excluded from the classroom?
No, not really.
Have you had experiences being misgendered inside or outside of the classroom?
A few times, dealing with DSPS, like sometimes a couple calls I got, they used my legal first name, so it was a little unexpected, but other than that, maybe a couple instances where I was dead named. But other than that, nothing.
Do you have your actual name in the system?
Yeah. I do have my preferred name as Izzy.
Have you had the experience of being misgendered in the classroom at all? Either by faculty or other students?
Not intentionally.
Okay. So even if it's unintentional, how does it make you feel when you're misgendered?
Well, for one, it tells me I don't really pass, at least on that day. Just feel depressed and disappointed a little.
Mm. It's depressing.
A little.
So, how do you think faculty, staff, and students can learn to use the correct pronouns for people? If you could tell them anything.
If you don't know, just ask.
And why do you think it's important for people to ask, to learn how to use the correct pronouns?
It helps those who would benefit from those questions being asked. Would help those feel more. It will help those who feel more included. Is what I'm trying to say.
So, I'm going to go from maybe talking about inside the classroom to talking more about life outside the classroom, so campus life in general. What are your experiences, or is there anything else you want to say about in the classroom?
I'm just going to retake that last line.
Okay.
It would help students feel more accepted and included by their peers and by their teachers.
And do you think that would help you be a better student in the classroom?
Yeah.
So in terms of your experiences broadly speaking on campus, what have your experiences been as somebody who identifies as bisexual and trans feminine outside of the classroom?
Sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, just what are your experiences, or what have your experiences been like in general as somebody who identifies as trans femme and bisexual?
It doesn't really come up outside of my social circle, like with friends. Like it's not really discussed if relevant with strangers, but I don't know, it's just kind of part of life, I guess. Just like my ADHD and ESD or depression.
What's your experience been trying to find bathrooms that you feel comfortable in?
I tend to go to the men's restroom because I don't really feel comfortable subjecting other women to that experience, to myself being in there. But of course, I don't really feel comfortable in the men's bathroom either. Um, I would like if there were a lot more gender neutral single stall restrooms around campus, because on ARC there are a few, like 2 or 3. And not at SCC, I think there's only one that's actually generally available, and it's down at the what's it called? It's pretty out of the way in the southern half of the campus. And the only other all gender neutral restrooms I found are at the cosmetology building, and they're usually locked except on Fridays.
KRC or here?
At SCC.
Oh, at SCC. Okay. Have you ever felt mistreated or uncomfortable using gender-specific restrooms?
Not really. It's not really an issue for me, at least in college campuses. I found, like, elsewhere I might get a double take sometimes in the men's room. But that's kind of rare. It does make me feel a little better. It does make me feel a little better when it does happen.
So you said you would like the college or the colleges to provide more gender-neutral bathrooms. Why do you think it's important for the colleges to prioritize doing that?
So that those who so people can feel actually safe and comfortable inside a restroom, because there are those who like me, who don't really feel they belong in either restroom.
So have you found community at SEC or ARC?
Absolutely. At SCC, I had a relatively large queer circle. Maybe 20 people that 15, 20 people that kind of all had lunch together. So that was nice. I guess as queer folks kind of are attracted to each other in general. Kind of come together naturally.
How did you find each other?
I talked to a classmate, a fellow trans classmate in my English class. We kind of got acquainted, and I saw they were eating lunch with some other people, and they called me over to join them. From there, kind of got introduced to the rest of the group, and just kind of we all started having lunch together.
So how important do you think community is, particularly queer community is, for your own sense of well-being in college?
It's absolutely essential. It provides a sense of belonging. It provides a place you can go to, a group of people you can share your feelings with. It's definitely important to have a place you feel you belong. And that front group did it for me. The Pride Center at SCC did it for me. Home base at ARC does that for me. The Pride Center at ARC is kind of in development at the moment. So it only just started being open 5 days a week, like in the second half of the semester. I generally have as big of a queer circle at ARC. I think mostly because I found a partner at ARC. Two, actually.
Do you want to elaborate at all on that? Something we haven't talked about yet, I realize. Being polyamorous. Or just, is there anything in particular you feel like you want to say about sort of figuring out being polyamorous? And yeah.
In my first relationship, my partner wanted to continue being able to see other people. And at the time, I was just too jealous to be able to handle it. You know, I wanted to be able to allow her to be happy in that way. It ended up just not working out at the time. We are still on friendly terms, and we are actually kind of definitely not in a relationship, but we are still friendly with each other. But after that relationship, I kind of took a break for a year-ish, and then I met my current partners. At ARC, the first few times, no, at ARC, I home base provided a sort of place I could hang out, and there I found Maddie, who, as it turns out, well, we sort of started a conversation. Turned out we both went to the same class. We both had a lot of similarities, like maybe scarily similar. And we just sort of hit it off. Feelings kind of started to grow. She mentioned that she already had a fiance, but she was polyamorous. I sort of resisted trying to form a crush on her because I knew that I in the past was too jealous to be able to have more than one partner, but didn't work. I decided to see what the hell, gave it a try, and I learned that polyamory is fucking great. I'm dating both her and her fiance. Yeah, it's been absolutely amazing. They are both wonderful, amazing people that I love so very much. And they're just, I don't know what I don't know what I would do without them.
Yeah, it's really nice. Is there anything else you want to say about life on campus in general and finding community?
I'm generally I consider myself a generally introverted person. Though I have been kind of working on that. I find it hard still to kind of put myself out there, meet new people, just kind of initiate, like, but when I do, it does result usually in good things. Spaces like the Pride Center and Home Base have definitely spaces like the Pride Center and the Home Base have definitely provided a sense of a place for me to go and just like hang out, talk to whoever else may be there. Whoever else may be there.
Which home base are you talking about?
The arts home base.
Okay, that's what I thought you were probably referring to. So what has it felt like seeing state after state pass anti-trans legislation? Has this impacted your well-being at all?
It's definitely made me nervous to continue living in America. It makes me sad that people want to see us dead or gone this badly. And people could just be so uncaring.
So one question that I forgot to ask earlier is about homelessness. You mentioned, I think, that you nearly experienced homelessness at some point. Do you feel comfortable talking about that?
Yeah. I don't know if I was truly close to experiencing homelessness, but I was definitely threatened with being kicked out at a few points. It definitely made me feel unsafe in my own home, as did parents' reactions in general. So, I mean, I did also consider running away at some points as well because of that. It definitely wasn't easy.
How old were you at that time?
16, 17, somewhere around that time.
Is there anything else you'd like to say about that, or anything else we've talked about today? Okay. Well, if you don't mind me asking this one last question, so what are you excited about when you think about your future? What are you looking forward to the most?
Getting a car, moving out, independence. Getting to live with my partners at some point, hopefully. Being able to transition, being able to get a job in a career I love, in a field I love. Just getting to be myself.
Thank you.